Hey everybody, welcome to remote learning day number 1, April 14th. This should be the day that you're watching this lesson. First of all, before we begin, I want to tell you that it is extremely strange to be looking at myself on camera while I'm talking to you. I have no idea how YouTubers do it. I feel very strange watching myself talk. I had my sister watch my video and she told me I didn't smile enough. So this smile's for her and you. It's hard to do this with no interaction on the other end, but I'm gonna make the best of it. So hi Amanda, and hello to all of the rest of you out there. She promised me she would watch all the videos with you so that she can learn about Lincoln, and I'm gonna give her a test too, and hers will be much harder than yours. So today is the official start of remote learning. I do wanna begin by reviewing, like I said, what we had talked about in class. So Abraham Lincoln was born February 12th, 1809 in what state? That's right, I heard you say Kentucky. He was born in Kentucky to Thomas and Nancy Lincoln. He also had a sister and a brother, a sister named Sarah and a brother named Thomas who died in infancy. Nancy and Thomas and the children packed up and left Kentucky and moved to, that's right, Indiana. They moved to Indiana for a couple of reasons, actually 3 to be exact. One reason why they left Kentucky was so that they could purchase land at a much cheaper price in Indiana, and that was readily available there. Second reason that they left was there was a dispute over the land that they currently owned in Kentucky, and they wanted to get away from all that drama, so they left Kentucky for that reason as well. And the third reason was the Lincoln family was very anti-slavery, and Kentucky was a slave state and Indiana was not. So for those 3 reasons, Thomas and Nancy packed up their kids, left Kentucky and went to Indiana. Once they reached Indiana, they bought their land, they set up homestead there, and unfortunately, Nancy, Lincoln's mother, came down with the milk sickness. If you remember correctly, milk sickness is when a cow eats white snake root, and that white snake root is not toxic to the cow, but it is toxic to humans. So once the cow ingests that white snake root, that toxin is then passed on through the milk to whoever is going to consume it. And unfortunately, that was Lincoln's mother, Nancy. She ended up dying of milk sickness when Lincoln was 9 years old. So of course, at that time, Sarah and Lincoln had to sort of step up and help out more around the house, pick up those chores that were normally their mother's chores. So the cooking and sewing clothes, cleaning, all of those things that were women's chores back then, they had to join together and help accomplish. And they also had to help out their father more. So Abraham at age 9 was very, very strong, and Lincoln's father, Thomas, was aware of that. And so he put him to work out on the farm, helping out with those chores. Lincoln was swinging an axe by the time he was 10. He always seemed to have an axe in his hand, according to what we've read about. And he helped out with splitting wood for fences and all kinds of those types of physical activities. Of course, Thomas at some point became lonely and wanted another wife, so he left his children in Indiana and went back to Kentucky. He went back to Kentucky, and that's where he ran across Sarah Bush Johnston, who he knew before from when their family lived out in Kentucky. And he ended up marrying her and bringing her back to Indiana. I would like to ask you this question, and I'll pause for a second. Think about the answer. When Sarah Bush Johnston made it to Indiana, what kind of condition did she find those children in? Hopefully you were able to say that when she arrived in Indiana, she found that Sarah and Abraham were in rough shape. Their clothes were tattered, they were very dirty. If you remember at one point we talked about how she was quoted as saying something about making them look human again. So we know that they were having a rough time while their father was gone. When she arrived, she brought books with her. And that was one thing that Abraham Lincoln was really, really, really into, was reading books. And he was very interested in that. And as we had stated in class, in that area in Indiana, education was not a focal point. It was not a priority. Priority was surviving. Priority was raising crops. Priority was taking care of your family. So very few children in that area actually attended school. They say that Thomas, his father, was only able to read and write and sign his own name and could not read anything else. So for Thomas and his family, education was not of the greatest importance. But for Abraham, he was really intrigued by it and curious about it and wanted to be able to do those things. So when his father would see him hanging around with a book in his hand, which your parents would be very, very, very happy to see you hanging out with a book, reading it. I bet if I asked them, they'd tell me yes. So when Thomas, though, when he would see Abraham Lincoln hanging out with a book, he would sort of tell him that he was lazy and say things that were not very nice to him. And that's going to play a role in their relationship as Abraham grows up. They had a very strained relationship. They were not the closest. And as you can imagine, if you were treated that way, that might be the case. So Abraham continued to help out with the chores on the farm. He did continue on his own to educate himself. So if you remember, one of the terms we talked about was self-educated. And what does that mean again? That's right. That means educating yourself without having gone to school or having a teacher involved. So he educated himself and taught himself how to read and write and do math. He did spend about 1 year in school. It was actually a little more than that. It was about 18 months, so that's about 1.5 years that he actually spent in school throughout his entire life. Quite amazing for someone who became president, that he spent very little time in a formal school setting. So, Abraham's self-educated, and he grows up in Indiana, and then finally at some point in his childhood, the family decides to leave Indiana and move to Illinois, which would be their final home. Do you remember, why did the family pack up from Indiana and move to Illinois? They moved to Illinois because Illinois has fertile soil. We talked about how in the summertime you drive around and you see fields of corn, you see fields of soybeans, you see fields of crops being grown all over Illinois. And so Abraham's family packed up for the promise of fertile soil in Illinois. So they moved here to Coles County, Illinois. When they moved here to Coles County, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln was 21 years old. And at 21, he's becoming an adult, kind of getting sick of his dad. They're not getting along very well. So Abraham decided it was time to set out on his own. So he set out on his own at age 22, and he moved to New Salem, Illinois. When he moved to New Salem, Illinois, he took on a job. Do you remember what that job was? The first job that he held when he moved to New Salem? That's right. He was a clerk in a general store. And if you know anything about what we talked about in class, we talked about how the general store was the place where you would go to get everything you needed, everything from some food supplies to any kind of home supplies that you would need. So, of course, everyone in New Salem began meeting Abraham Lincoln and became acquainted with him and knew who he was because they had to go in there to get their items. So he was a clerk in a general store for quite some time. And then we know that he was appointed as a captain in the militia during the Black Hawk War. Of course, we talked about how he did not see any battle. And we also talked about how the rumor is, we're not really sure if it's true, but that when he was younger, he shot a turkey. And at that moment when he killed something, he said, not for me. I'm not into this killing thing. So it only makes sense that it was kind of good for him that he didn't see any kind of battle when he was in the Black Hawk War. So people are starting to put their trust into Lincoln. They're trusting him, and they're putting him into leadership roles. So he also took on a few other jobs. Of course, he was worked as a rail splitter, worked in the local grist mill. He was a farmhand. He just took on any kind of odd jobs that he could to just try to be able to get by. Now, as we know, at some point, he opens a general store, and this time it's his own with a partner. And unfortunately, the partner that he opened the general store with passed away, and that left Lincoln with a huge debt. And at that time, Lincoln could have sort of done what his stepbrother, John Johnston, had done and just kind of run away from it all. But Lincoln did not take that route. Instead, Lincoln took the route of working off for 18 years, taking 18 years to repay that debt that he had owed from that store kind of going under. Another story that's said about him is that when he was a clerk, back when he was a clerk at the general store, that there was a woman who left her item that she had purchased along with her money on the counter, and that he had traveled many miles to return that to her, and that's part of the whole nickname where the nickname Honest Abe came from. So he worked to pay off that debt. We had also read letters from John Johnston to Abraham Lincoln, him pleading and begging for money. I think that most of you were surprised. You know, we hear lots of great things about Abraham Lincoln. I think most of you were surprised by his response at first. His response was, put on your work boots, get to work, and figure this out yourself. I've given you money before, and you did not use it wisely, and this did not fix your problem. So you need to take it upon yourself to work that debt off. I'll help you out a little bit here, maybe match $1 for every dollar that you make. Which was generous enough, but he really wanted his brother to get out and do things for himself so that he wouldn't end up in that same situation again and spend his whole life in debt. So at this point, that's kind of where we stopped. So that was sort of Lincoln's birth, early childhood into his young adulthood. We did talk about at the very end how when Abraham was elected into the Illinois state legislature, remember that's a state government job, and that means he would have to report to Springfield, Illinois, that we had talked about how it was kind of a problem for him because it didn't pay enough money. You know, he needed money to be able to support himself and the life that he had, but he also needed extra money so he could pay back that debt that took 18 years to pay off. So it was very important for him to be able to make enough money to do all of those things. So he knew one thing that would work for him and that he was interested in was law. So he also was a self-taught lawyer. So he read books on becoming a lawyer. And at the very end of this unit, we talked about how he passed those exams and actually accomplished becoming a lawyer all by himself, which is quite an accomplishment. And pretty amazing. So that's kind of where we left off in class. We were going to answer our study guide. We were going to take a test, and you guys kind of got out of that one. The study guide was in your first packet that was left outside the building a few weeks ago, so hopefully you completed that. Please remember, if you can, you or a family member, please just take a couple pictures of a few pages that you completed in that packet and email that to me. Moving forward, those of you who are watching me now, chances are you're using Google Classroom and completing the remote learning and doing everything online. That's great. So for today, we had a video. When you're done watching this video, you'll see that there is a follow-up question for you to complete. Make sure you complete it and you click Turn In. It's very important that you click Turn In. I am keeping record of who's turning in assignments and who is not. It will be considered incomplete if you do not complete the assignment. So you must complete the assignment. My lessons every day should take anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, and I can see on my camera, I'm at about 14 minutes at this point. So we've kind of reviewed, we have a question. Now the official real new stuff is going to begin tomorrow, April 15th. So please come back every day. You can set a reminder on your phone for the same time every day. Might be a good idea to remind yourself to check Google Classroom. Come back tomorrow, watch the next video, which will be the introduction to Lincoln's life in politics. A lot of really cool, more interesting stuff, if you will, is going to come about soon in Lincoln's life. He's going to get married too. But some good stuff there for you to watch and listen to. All of these videos will help you with the study guide and the test that will come about at the end of each unit. For today, there are no notes. On the days that there are notes, and that will start tomorrow because that's the new information, I will put those notes. If you look at the Google Classroom, the main screen online, there it says stream, and that's where your assignment is. So you'll see the video for the day. You'll see the question, and then there will be another place where I will upload the notes. And so the notes, you have a couple options. You can take a picture with your phone if you're pulling that up on a computer, or you can screenshot it if it's on your actual phone that you're doing all of this work. Or you can even opt to write it down on a piece of paper just as we would have in class. Purely up to you, whatever works for you. Kind of flexible with that kind of thing. So, any questions? And I tried to smile more. I promise I tried to smile more. I wish I could see your faces, and I wish I could talk to you, and I wish that I could answer all of your questions and you could answer mine, but we'll do the best we can. And if you have any questions at all, anytime, email me. You can also comment and ask a question when you are answering your assignment and completing it. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. I miss you guys, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.